Section 7 of the Conjure Woman. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by James K. White. Section 7 of the Conjure Woman by Charles Waddell Chesnutt. Hotfoot Hannibal. I hate you and despise you. I wish never to see you or speak to you again. Very well, I will take care that henceforth you have no opportunity to do either. These words, the first in the passionately vibrant tones of my sister-in-law, and the latter in the deeper and more restrained accents of an angry man, startled me from my nap. I had been dozing in my hammock on the front piazza, behind the honeysuckle vine. I had been faintly aware of a buzz of conversation in the parlor, but had not at all awakened to its import until these sentences fell, or I might rather say were hurled upon my ear. I presume the young people had either not seen me lying there, the Venetian blinds opening from the parlor windows upon the piazza were partly closed on account of the heat, or else in their excitement they had forgotten my proximity. I felt somewhat concerned. The young man, I had remarked, was proud, firm, jealous of the point of honor, and, from my observation of him, quite likely to resent to the bitter end what he deemed a slight or an injustice. The girl, I knew, was quite as high-spirited as young Murchison. I feared she was not so just, and hoped she would prove more yielding. I knew that her affections were strong and enduring, but that her temperament was capricious and her sunniest moods easily overcast by some small cloud of jealousy or pique. I had never imagined, however, that she was capable of such intensity as was revealed by these few words of hers. As I say, I felt concerned. I had learned to like Malcolm Murchison, and had heartily consented to his marriage with my ward, for it was in that capacity that I had stood for a year or two to my wife's younger sister, Mabel. The match, thus rudely broken off, had promised to be another link binding me to the kindly Southern people among whom I had not long before taken up my residence. Young Murchison came out of the door, cleared the piazza in 2 strides without seeming aware of my presence, and went off down the lane at a furious pace. A few moments later Mabel began playing the piano loudly, with a touch that indicated anger and pride and independence, and a dash of exultation, as though she were really glad that she had driven away forever the young man whom the day before she had loved with all the ardor of a first passion. I hoped that time might heal the breach and bring the 2 young people together again. I told my wife what I had overheard. In return, she gave me Mabel's version of the affair. "I do not see how it can ever be settled," my wife said. "It is something more than a mere lovers' quarrel. It began, it is true, because she found fault with him for going to church with that hateful Branson girl. But before it ended there were things said that no woman of any spirit could stand. I am afraid it is all over between them." I was sorry to hear this. In spite of the very firm attitude taken by my wife and her sister, I still hoped that the quarrel would be made up within a day or 2. Nevertheless, when a week had passed with no word from young Murchison, and with no sign of relenting on Mabel's part, I began to think myself mistaken. One pleasant afternoon, about 10 days after the rupture, old Julius drove the rockaway up to the piazza, and my wife Mabel and I took our seats for a drive to a neighbor's vineyard, over on the Lumberton plank road. "Which way shall we go?" I asked, "the short road or the long one?" "I guess we had better take the short road," answered my wife. "We will get there sooner." "It's a mighty fine drive roun' by the big road, Miss Annie," observed Julius, "and it don't take much longer to get there." "No," said my wife, "I think we will go by the short road. There is a bay tree in blossom near the mineral spring, and I wish to get some of the flowers." "I specs you'd find some bay trees 'long de big road, ma'am," suggested Julius. "But I know about the flowers on the short road, and they are the ones I want." We drove down the lane to the highway, and soon struck into the short road leading past the mineral spring. Our route lay partly through a swamp, and on each side the dark, umbrageous foliage, unbroken by any clearing, lent to the road solemnity, and to the air a refreshing coolness. About half a mile from the house, and about halfway to the mineral spring, we stopped at the tree of which my wife had spoken, and reaching up to the low-hanging boughs, I gathered a dozen of the fragrant white flowers. When I resumed my seat in the rockaway, Julius started the mare. She went on for a few rods, until we had reached the edge of a branch crossing the road, when she stopped short. "Why did you stop, Julius?" I asked. "I didn't, suh," he replied. "'Twas de mare stop. Git 'long dere, Lucy. What you mean by dis foolishness?" Julius jerked the reins and applied the whip lightly, but the mare did not stir. "Perhaps you had better get down and lead her," I suggested. "If you get her started, you can cross on the log and keep your feet dry." Julius alighted, took hold of the bridle, and vainly essayed to make the mare move. She planted her feet with even more evident obstinacy. "I don't know what to make of this," I said. "I have never known her to balk before. Have you, Julius?" "No, suh," replied the old man, "I neber has. It's a cur'ous thing to me, suh." "What's the best way to make her go?" "I specs, suh, dat ef I'd turn her roun', she'd go de udder way." "But we want her to go this way." "Well, suh, I 'low ef we jes' set here fer 5 minutes, she'll start up by herse'f." "All right," I rejoined. "It is cooler here than any place I have struck to day. We'll let her stand for a while, and see what she does." We had sat in silence for a few minutes, when Julius suddenly ejaculated, "Uh-huh, I knows why dis mare don't go. It jes' flashed 'cross my recommembrance." "Why is it, Julius?" I inquired. "'Cause she sees Chloe." "Where is Chloe?" I demanded. "Chloe done be'n dead dese 40 years er mo'," the old man returned. "Her ha'nt is settin' ober yonder on de udder side er de branch, under dat willer tree, dis blessed minute." "Why, Julius," said my wife, "do you see the haunt?" "No'm," he answered, shaking his head, "I don't see her, but de mare sees her." "How do you know?" I inquired. "Well, suh, dis yer is a gray hoss, en dis yer is a Friday, en a gray hoss can alluz see a ha'nt w'at walks on Friday." "Who is Chloe?" said Mabel. "And why does Chloe's haunt walk?" asked my wife. "It's all in de tale, ma'am," Julius replied, with a deep sigh. "It's all in de tale." "Tell us the tale," I said. "Perhaps by the time you get through, the haunt will go away and the mare will cross." I was willing to humor the old man's fancy. He had not told us a story for some time, and the dark and solemn swamp around us, the amber colored stream flowing silently and sluggishly at our feet, like the waters of Lethe, the heavy aromatic scent of the bays faintly suggestive of funeral wreaths, all made the place an ideal one for a ghost story. "Chloe," Julius began in a subdued tone, "used to belong to ole Mars Dugal' McAdoo, my ole marster. She was a lackly gal en a smart gal, en ole Miss tuk her up ter de big house en l'arnt her ter wait on de w'ite folks, till bimeby she come ter be Missus' own maid, en 'peared ter 'low she run de house herse'f ter hear her talk erbout it. I wuz a young boy den, en used ter wuk 'bout de stables, so I knowed eve'ything dat wuz gwine on roun' de plantation. Well, one time Mars Dugal' wanted a house boy, en sont down ter de quarters fer ter hab Jeff en Hannibal come up ter de big house nex' mawnin'. Ole marster en ole miss look' de two boys ober, en 'scussed wid derselves fer a little w'ile, en den Mars Dugal' says he, 'We lacks Hannibal de bes', and we gwine ter keep 'em. Hey, Hannibal, you'll work at de house fum now on, en ef you a good nigger en minds yo' business, I'll give you Chloe fer a wife nex' spring. You other nigger, you, Jeff, you kin go back ter de quarters. We ain' gwine ter need you." Now Chloe had been standing there behind ole Miss doing all this here talk, and Chloe made up her mind from the very first minute she sot eyes on them two that she didn't like that nigger Hannibal, and wa'n't never gwine ter care for him, and she was just as sure that she liked Jeff, and was gwine ter set store by him, whether Mars Dugal took him in the big house or no. And so, co'se, Chloe was monst'us sorry when ole Mars Dugal took Hannibal and sont Jeff back. So she slipped round the house and waylaid Jeff on the way back to the quarters, and told him not to be downhearted, for she was gwine ter see if she couldn't find some way or 'nother to get rid of that nigger Hannibal, and get Jeff up to the house in his place. The new houseboy cotch on monst'us fast, and it wa'n't no time hardly before Mars Dugal and ole Miss both commenced to 'low Hannibal was the best houseboy dey ever had. He was peart and supple, quick as lightnin', and sharp as a razor. But Chloe didn't like his ways. He was so sho' he was gwine ter git her in the spring that it didn't 'pear to 'low he had to do any co'tin', and when he'd run across Chloe 'bout de house, he'd swell roun' her in a biggity way, and say, 'Come here and kiss me, honey, you gwine ter be mine in the spring. You don't 'pear to be as fond of me as you oughter be.' Chloe didn't care nuffin fer Hannibal, and hadn't cared nuffin fer him, and she sot jest as much sto' by Jeff as she did the day she fust laid eyes on him. And the mo' familious dis yer Hannibal got, the mo' Chloe let her mind run on Jeff, and one evenin' she went down to the quarters and watch' till she got a chance fer to talk wid him by herse'f. And she tole Jeff fer to go down and see ole Aunt Peggy, de Conjure Woman down by the Wilmington Road, and ax her to give 'em somethin' to help get Hannibal out'n the big house, so the white folks 'u'd send fer Jeff ag'in. And bein' as Jeff didn't have nuffin to give Aunt Peggy, Chloe gun 'im a silver dollar and a silk handkerchief fer to pay her wid, fer Aunt Peggy nebber liked to work fer nobody fer nuffin. So Jeff slip' off down to Aunt Peggy's one night, and gun her de present he brung her, and tole her all about him and Chloe and Hannibal, and ax her to help him out. Aunt Peggy tole him she'd work her roots, and fer him to come back de nex' night, and she'd tell him what she could do fer him. So de nex' night Jeff went back, and Aunt Peggy gun him a baby doll, wid a body made out'n a piece of cornstalk, and wid splinters fer arms and legs, and a head made out'n elderberry peth, and 2 little red peppers fer feet. "Dis yer baby doll," says she, "is Hannibal. Dis yer peth head is Hannibal's head, and dese yer pepper feet is Hannibal's feet. You take dis and hide it under de house, on de sill under de do', where Hannibal have to walk over it eve'y day, and as long as Hannibal comes anywhere near dis baby doll, he'll be jes' like it is, light-headed and hot-footed, and if dem 2 things don't git him into trouble mighty soon, then I'm no conjure woman. But when you git Hannibal back out'n de house, and git all th'ough wid dis baby doll, you mus' fetch it back ter me, fer it's monst'us powerful goopher, and is liable to make mo' trouble ef you leave it layin' aroun'." Well, Jeff took de baby doll and slip' up to de big house, and whistle' to Chloe, and when she come out he tole her what ole Aunt Peggy had said, and Chloe showed him how to git under de house, and when he had put de cunjuh doll on de sill, he went along back to de quarters, and jes' waited. Nex' day, sho' 'nuff, de goopher commenced to work. Hannibal started in de house soon in de mawnin' wid a armful of wood ter make a fire, and he hadn't mo' d'n got 'cross de do' sill before his feet begun to burn, so dat he dropped de armful of wood on de flo', and woke ole Miss up an hour sooner 'n usual, and co'se ole Miss didn't like dat, and spoke sharp about it. When dinner time come, and Hannibal was helping to cook care of the dinner from the kitchen into the big house, and was getting close to the door where he had to go in, his feet started to burn, and his head began to swim, and he let the big dish of chicken and dumplings fall right down in the dirt, in the middle of the yard, and the white folks had to make their dinner that day off'n cold ham and sweetened taters. The next morning he overslept hisself, and got into mo' trouble. After breakfast, Mars Dugal sont him over to Mars Marrabo Utley's fer to borrow a monkey wrench. He oughter been back in half an hour, but he come pokin' home 'bout dinner time wid a screwdriver stid er a monkey wrench. Mars Dugal' sont anudder nigger back wid de screwdriver, en Hannibal didn't git no dinner. Along in de atternoon, ole Miss sot Hannibal ter weedin' de flowers in de front gyarden, en Hannibal dug up all de bulbs ole Miss had sont away fer, en paid a lot of money fer, en tuk 'em down ter de hog pen by de barnyard en fed 'em ter de hogs. W'en ole Miss come out in de cool er de evenin' en seed w'at Hannibal had done, she wuz mos' crazy, en she wrote a note en sont Hannibal down ter de oberseer wid it. But w'at Hannibal got fum de oberseer didn't 'pear ter do no good. Eve'y now en den his feet 'd 'mence ter torment 'im, en his min' 'd git all mixed up, en his conduc' keep gittin' wusser en wusser, till finally de w'ite folks couldn't stan' it no longer, en Mars Dugal' tuk Hannibal back down ter de quarters. "Mrs. Smith," says Mars Dugal' ter de oberseer, "dis yer nigger is done got so triflin' yer lately dat we can't keep him in de house no mo', en I's fotch 'im ter you ter be straighten' up. You's had 'casion ter deal wid 'im once, so he knows w'at ter expec'. You des take 'im in han' en lemme know how he turns out, en w'en de han's come in fum de fiel' dis evenin', you kin sen' dat yeller nigger Jeff up ter de house. I'll try 'im en see ef he's any better 'n Hannibal." So Jeff went up to the big house, and pleased Mars Dugal' and ole Miss and the rest of the family so well that they all got to lacking him fust rate, and they'd 'a' forgot all 'bout Hannibal if it hadn't been for the bad reports what come up from the quarters 'bout him for a month or so. Fac' is dat Chloe and Jeff was so interested in one another since Jeff been up to the house that they forgot all about taking the baby doll back to Aunt Peggy, and it kept working for a while and making Hannibal's feet burn more or less, till all the folks on the plantation got to callin' him Hotfoot Hannibal. He kept getting mo' and mo' triflin', till he got the name of bein' the most no 'countest nigger on the plantation, and Mars Dugal' had to threaten to sell him in the spring, when bimeby de goopher quit workin', and Hannibal commenced to pick up some, and make folks set a little mo' sto' by him. Now dis yer Hannibal was a monst'us smart nigger, and when he got rid of dem soft feet, his mind kept runnin' on his udder troubles. Here 3 or 4 weeks befo', he'd had a easy job waitin' on de w'ite folks, livin' off'n de fat er de lan', and promised de finest gal on de plantation fer a wife in de spring, and now here he was back in de cornfiel, wid de oberseer cussin' and a r'arin' ef he didn't git a hard task done, wid nuffin but corn bread en bacon en molasses to eat, and all de fiel' hands makin' remarks and pokin' fun at him 'cause he'd be'n sont back from de big house to de fiel', and de mo' Hannibal studied 'bout it, de mo' madder he got, till he finally swo' he was gwine ter git eben wid Jeff and Chloe ef it was de las' act. So Hannibal slip' way fum de quarters one Sunday en hid in de corn, up close to de big house, till he see Chloe gwine down de road. He waylaid her, en sez he, "Howdy, Chloe." "I ain' got no time fer ter fool wid fiel' han's," sez Chloe, tossin' her head. "W'at you want wid me, Hotfoot?" "I wants ter know how you en Jeff is gittin' along." "I 'lows dat's none er yo' business, nigger. I don't see w'at 'casion any common fiel' han' has got ter mix in wid de 'fairs er folks w'at lives in de big house. But ef it'll do you any good ter know, I mought say dat me en Jeff is gittin' 'long mighty well, en we gwine ter git married in de spring. En you ain' gwine ter be invited ter de weddin', nuther." "No, no," sez he, "I wouldn' 'spec ter be invited ter de weddin', a common low down fiel' han' like I is. But I's glad ter hear you en Jeff is gittin' 'long so well. I didn' knowed but w'at he had commenced ter be a little tired." "Tired er me? Dat's ridiculous," sez Chloe. "Why, dat nigger lufs me so, I b'liebe he'd go th'oo fire en water fer me. Dat nigger is des wrop' up in me." "Uh-huh," sez Hannibal. "Den I reckon dere mus' be some udder nigger w'at meets a woman down by de crick in de swamp eve'y Sunday evenin', ter say nuffin 'bout 2 or 3 times a week." "Yes, it is anudder nigger, en you is a liar w'en you say it was Jeff." "Maybe I is a liar, en maybe I ain' got good eyes. But less'n I is a liar, en less'n I ain' got good eyes, Jeff is gwine ter meet dat woman dis evenin', 'long 'bout 8 o'clock, right down dere by de crick in de swamp, 'bout halfway betwixt dis plantation en Mars Marrabo Utley's." Well, Chloe tole Hannibal she didn't b'liebe a word he said, and call him a low-down nigger who was trying to slander Jeff 'cause he was more lucky'n he was. But all the same, she couldn't keep her mind from running on what Hannibal had said. She 'membered she'd heard one of the niggers say there was a gal over at Mars Marrabo Utley's plantation where Jeff used to go with some before he got 'quainted with Chloe. Then she commenced to figure back, and sure enough there was 2 or 3 times in the last week when she'd been helping the ladies with their dressing and other fixings in the evening, and Jeff might have gone down to the swamp without her knowing about it at all. And then she commenced to remember little things which she had took no notice of before, and what'd make it appear like Jeff had something on his mind. Chloe set a monstrous heap of store by Jeff, and would have done most anything for him, so long as he stuck to her. But Chloe was a mighty jealous woman, and while she didn't believe what Hannibal said, she see how it could have been so, and she determined to find out for herself whether it was so or no. Now Chloe hadn't seen Jeff all day, for Mars Dugal had sent Jeff over to his daughter's house, young Miss Margaret's, what lived 'bout 4 miles from Mars Dugal's, and Jeff wasn't expected home till evening. But just after supper was over, and whiles the ladies was setting out on the piazza, Chloe slip off from the house and run down the road, this here same road we come. And when she got most to the crick, this here same crick right before us, she kinder kep' in the bushes at the side of the road, till finally she seed Jeff sitting on the bank on the other side of the crick, right under that old willow tree dropping over the water yonder. And every now and then he'd get up and look up the road towards Mars Marrabo's on the other side of the swamp. First, Chloe felt like she'd go right over the crick and give Jeff a piece of her mind. Then she 'lowed she better be sure before she done anything. So she helt herself in best she could, getting madder and madder every minute, till by and by she seed a woman comin' down the road on the other side from towards Mars Marrabo Utley's plantation. And when she seed Jeff jump up and run towards that woman and throw his arms round her neck, po' Chloe didn't stop to see no mo', but just turnt round and run up to the house, and rush up on the piazza, and up and told Mars Dugal and ole Miss all 'bout the baby doll, and all 'bout Jeff getting a goopher from Aunt Peggy, and 'bout what the goopher had done to Hannibal. Mars Dugal was monstrous mad. He didn't let on at first like he believed Chloe, but when she took and showed him where to find the baby doll, Mars Dugal turned white as chalk. "What devil's work is this?" says he. "No wonder the po' nigger's feet itched. Somethin' got to be done to l'arnt that old witch to keep her hands off my niggers. And as for this here Jeff, I'm gwine to do just what I promise, so the darkies on this plantation'll know I means what I says." For Mars Dugal had warned the hands befo' 'bout foolin' with conjuration. Fact, he had lost 1 or 2 niggers hisself from they being goophered, and he would 'a' had ole Aunt Peggy whipped long ago, only Aunt Peggy was a free woman, and he was feared she'd conjure 'em. And whiles Mars Dugal say he didn't believe in conjuring and such, he 'peared to 'low it was best to be on the safe side, and let Aunt Peggy 'lone. So Mars Dugal done jest as he say. If ole Miss had pleed for Jeff, he might 'a' kep' him, but ole Miss hadn't got over losin' them bulbs yet, and she neber said a word. Mars Dugal took Jeff to town next day and sold him to a speculator, who started down the river with him next mornin' on a steamboat, for to take him to Alabama. Now, when Chloe told old Mars Dugal 'bout dis yer baby doll and dis other goopher, she hadn't hardly 'lowed Mars Dugal would sell Jeff down South. Howsomeber, she was so mad wid Jeff dat she swaded herself she didn't care, and so she helt her head up and went round lookin' like she was rale glad about it. But one day she was walkin' down the road, when who should come 'long but dis yer Hannibal. When Hannibal seed her, he bust out laughin' fittin' fer to kill. "Yah, yah, yah, ho, 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 ha, ha, ha. Oh, hold me, honey, hold me, or I'll laugh myself to death. I ain' neber laughed so much sence I been born." "What you laughin' at, Hotfoot?" "Yah, yah, yah, what I laughin' at? Why, I's laughin' at myself, to be sho', laughin' to think what a fine woman I made." Chloe turnt pale, and her heart come up in her mouth. "What you mean, nigger?" says she, ketchin' holt of a bush by the road fer to steady herself. "What you mean by de kinder woman you made?" What do I mean? I means dat I got squared up wid you fer treatin' me de way you done, en I got even wid dat yaller nigger Jeff fer cuttin' me out. Now he's gwine ter know w'at it is ter eat cornbread and molasses once mo', en work fum daylight ter dark, en ter have a oberseer drivin' him fum one day's een' ter de udder. I means dat I sont word ter Jeff dat Sunday dat you was gwine ter be ober ter Mars Marrabo's visitin' dat evenin', en you want 'im ter meet you down by de crick on de way home en go de rest er de road wid you. En den I put on a frock en a sunbonnet, en fix myself up to look like a woman, en when Jeff seed me comin', he run to meet me, en you seed 'im, fer I'd be'n a watchin' in de bushes befo' en 'skivered you comin' down de road. En now I reckon you en Jeff bofe knows w'at it means ter mess wid a nigger like me." Po' Chloe hadn't heared mo' den half er de las' part er w'at Hannibal said, but she had heared 'nuff ter learnt dat dis nigger had fooled her en Jeff, en dat po' Jeff hadn't done nuffin, en dat fer lovin' her too much en goin' ter meet her, she had cause him ter be sole away, where she'd neber see him no mo'. De sun mought shine by day, de moon by night, de flowers mought bloom, en de mockingbirds mought sing, but po' Jeff was done los' ter her foreber en foreber. Hannibal hadn't mo' den finish' w'at he had ter say when Chloe's knees gun away under her, en she fell down in de road en lay dere half an hour er so befo' she come to. When she did, she crep' up ter de house des ez pale ez a ghost. En fer a month er so she crawl' roun' de house en 'peared ter be so po'ly dat Mars Dugal' sont fer a doctor, en de doctor kep' on axin' her questions till he foun' she was des pinin' away fer Jeff. W'en he tole Mars Dugal', Mars Dugal' laugh, en say he fix dat. She could hab de new house boy fer a husban'. But ole Miss say no, Chloe ain't dat kin' er gal, en dat Mars Dugal' should buy Jeff back. So Mars Dugal' writ a letter ter dis yer speculator down ter Wim'l'ton, en tole ef he ain't sol' dat nigger Souf w'at he bought fum him, he'd lack ter buy him back ag'in. Chloe commenced ter pick up a little w'en ole Miss tole her 'bout dis letter. Howsomever, bimeby Mars Dugal' got a answer fum de speculator, who said he was monst'us sorry, but Jeff had fell overboard er jump' off'n a steamboat on de way ter Wim'l'ton, en got drown', en co'se he couldn't sell him back, much ez he'd like ter 'bleedge Mars Dugal'. Well, atter Chloe heared dis, she wa'n't much mo' use ter nobody. She purtended ter do her wuk, en ole Miss put up wid her, en had de doctor give her medicine, en let her go ter de circus en all sorts er things fer ter take her min' off'n her troubles, but dey didn' none of 'em do no good. Chloe got ter slippin' down here in de evenin' des like she 'uz comin' ter meet Jeff, en she set dere under dat willer tree on de udder side en wait fer 'im night atter night. Bimeby she got so bad de w'ite folks sont her ober ter young Miss Margaret's fer ter gib her a change, but she runned away de fus' night, en w'en dey look fer her de nex' mornin', dey foun' her corpse layin' in de branch yonder, right 'cross fum whar we settin' now. Eber sence den," said Julius in conclusion, "Chloe's ha'nt comes eve'y evenin' en sits down under dat willer tree en waits fer Jeff er else walks up en down de road yonder, lookin' en waitin' fer a sweetheart w'at ain't neber eber come back ter her no mo'." There was silence when the old man had finished, and I am sure I saw a tear in my wife's eye, and more than one in Mabel's. "I think, Julius," said my wife, after a moment, "that you may turn the mare around and go by the long road." The old man obeyed with alacrity, and I noticed no reluctance on the mare's part. "You are not afraid of Chloe's haunt, are you?" I asked jocularly. My mood was not responded to, and neither of the ladies smiled. "Oh, no," said Annie, "but I've changed my mind. I prefer the other route." When we had reached the main road, and had proceeded along it for a short distance, we met a cart driven by a young negro, and on the cart were a trunk and a valise. We recognized the man as Malcolm Murchison's servant, and drew up a moment to speak to him. "Who's going away, Marshall?" I inquired. "Young Mistah Malcolm gwine away on de boat ter New York dis evenin', suh, en I'm takin' his things down ter de wharf, suh." This was news to me, and I heard it with regret. My wife looked sorry, too, and I could see that Mabel was trying hard to hide her concern. He's comin' 'long behind, suh, and I 'spects you'll meet 'im up the road a piece. He's gwine ter walk down ez fur ez Mistah Jim Williams's, en take de buggy fum dere ter town. He 'spects ter be gone a long time, suh, en say prob'ly he ain' never comin' back." The man drove on. There were few words exchanged in an undertone between my wife and Mabel, which I did not catch. Then Annie said, "Julius, you may stop the rockaway a moment. There are some trumpet flowers by the road there that I want. Will you get them for me, John?" I sprang into the underbrush, and soon returned with a great bunch of scarlet blossoms. "Where is Mabel?" I asked, noting her absence. "She has walked on ahead. We shall overtake her in a few minutes." The carriage had gone only a short distance when my wife discovered that she had dropped her fan. "I had it where we were stopping. Julius, will you go back and get it for me?" Julius got down and went back for the fan. He was an unconscionably long time finding it. After we got started again, we had gone only a little way when we saw Mabel and young Murchison coming toward us. They were walking arm in arm, and their faces were aglow with the light of love. I do not know whether or not Julius had a previous understanding with Malcolm Murchison, by which he was to drive us round by the long road that day, nor do I know exactly what motive influenced the old man's exertions in the matter. He was fond of Mabel, but I was old enough and knew Julius well enough to be skeptical of his motives. It is certain that a most excellent understanding existed between him and Murchison after the reconciliation, and that when the young people set up housekeeping over at the old Murchison place, Julius had an opportunity to enter their service. For some reason or other, however, he preferred to remain with us. The mare, I might add, was never known to balk again. End of Hotfoot Hannibal. Recording by James K. White, Chula Vista. End of The Conjure Woman, by Charles Waddell Chesnutt.